Sarah Washington woke up early on that bright Monday morning, her mind already focused on the important day ahead. At 45 years old, she had worked hard to become one of Atlanta's best brain doctors. Today, she had to fly to Boston to give a big speech at a medical meeting, where doctors from all over the country would be listening to her talk about new ways to treat brain problems. As she got ready, Sarah checked her phone and saw she was running a bit late. She had stayed up until midnight the night before, working on a special case at Atlanta General Hospital. The surgery had been successful, but it had left her with less time to prepare for her trip than she had planned. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Her dark blue suit was perfect, and her natural hair was styled neatly. She grabbed her small suitcase and her laptop bag, making sure she had all her important papers. The private plane ticket that cost a lot of money, but the medical conference organizers had insisted on getting her there quickly. "Everything's set," she said to herself, picking up her car keys. Her Mercedes pulled out of the driveway of her beautiful house in the nice part of Atlanta. The morning traffic was heavy, but she knew a shortcut to the airport that would help her make up some time. When Sarah arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, she drove past the regular terminals where normal flights took off. Her private plane was waiting at a special part of the airport, where rich people and important business people usually flew from. She had never used a private plane before, but she was excited about the new experience. The special terminal looked very fancy. It had big glass windows and marble floors that shined in the morning sun. Sarah parked her car in the VIP parking area, where a young man in a red vest offered to help her with her bags. She smiled and thanked him but said she could manage on her own. As she walked toward the terminal entrance, Sarah noticed how quiet it was compared to the main airport. A few other people were there too. A man in an expensive suit talking on his phone, and a family with two kids who looked like they were going on vacation. They all had that confident look of people who were used to flying private. Sarah checked her watch. It was 8:45 a.m., and her flight was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Perfect timing, she thought. She had her medical license, passport, and all the plane papers in her bag. The conference organizers had sent her several emails about the flight, and she had printed everything just to be safe. The morning sun made the glass building shine, and Sarah felt proud of how far she had come. 20 years ago, she had been a young student dreaming of becoming a doctor. Now, she was Dr. Sarah Washington, going to Boston to teach other doctors about her special way of doing brain surgery that had helped save many lives. As she reached the entrance, Sarah saw a security guard standing there. He was a middle-aged white man with gray hair at his temples, wearing a blue uniform with a shiny badge. His name tag read Richard Cooper, and he was watching everyone who came in with careful eyes. Sarah took out her papers and ID, ready to show them just like she always did at airports. She had done this hundreds of times before when flying for medical conferences. The only difference today was that she was using the private terminal instead of the regular one. The guard looked at her approaching, and something in his expression made Sarah pause for a moment. His face changed when he saw her, and not in a good way. His friendly nod to the businessman who had just walked in turned into a hard stare when he looked at her. Sarah took a deep breath and walked forward anyway. She was used to people being surprised when they found out she was a doctor, but she never let it stop her. She held her head high and walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking on the marble floor, ready to start her journey to Boston. Little did she know that this normal Monday morning was about to turn into something very different, all because of what would happen in the next few minutes at that private terminal entrance. As Sarah reached the security desk, guard Richard Cooper put up his hand to stop her. His face showed a look that Sarah had seen many times before in her life, a mix of doubt and something else that made her stomach tighten. "Where do you think you're going?" Cooper asked in a loud voice that made other people turn and look. His tone was not the same friendly one he had used with the businessman just moments ago. Sarah kept her voice calm and professional. "Good morning. I'm here for my private flight to Boston. I have all my papers right here." She opened her designer bag and took out her carefully organized documents. Cooper looked at her expensive suit and bag with suspicious eyes. "Private flight?" he said, stretching out the words like they were hard to believe. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" "I'm Dr. Sarah Washington. I'm a brain surgeon at Atlanta General Hospital," Sarah replied, placing her medical license, passport, and flight papers on the desk. She had learned over the years that staying calm was the best way to handle situations like this. The guard picked up her papers like they might be fake. He looked at her medical license for a long time, then at her face, then back at the license. Meanwhile, a white woman in tennis clothes walked past them with just a quick wave of her hand. Cooper nodded at her without even asking for ID. "Wait here," Cooper said to Sarah. He picked up his phone and started making calls, still holding all her documents. Sarah watched as the minutes ticked by on the large clock on the wall. Her flight was in 30 minutes, and she was still stuck at the security desk. "Is there a problem?" Sarah asked politely. She could feel her heart beating faster, but her voice stayed steady. Years of doing difficult surgeries had taught her how to stay calm under pressure. Cooper looked up from his phone. "Well, it's very unusual to see someone claiming to be a doctor trying to use the private terminal. We have to be very careful about security these days." Sarah understood what he meant by someone like her. She had heard words like these before, in school, at hospitals, and now here. She took another deep breath. "Sir, I understand security is important," she said. "But I have shown you my medical license, my passport, and the papers for my flight. The conference organizers booked this flight for me weeks ago. You can call them to check." More people were walking past now. Some gave quick looks at what was happening, but most hurried by. A few took out their phones and started recording quietly. Cooper didn't seem to notice as he continued to question Sarah. "How long have you supposedly been a doctor?" he asked, still holding her documents. "And how did you afford a private flight?" His questions were getting more personal and less professional with each minute. Sarah stood straight and looked him in the eye. "I've been a neurosurgeon for 15 years. I'm the head of brain surgery at Atlanta General. And I'm going to be late for a very important medical conference where I'm the main speaker." Cooper laughed a little, and the sound made Sarah's shoulders tense. "Head of brain surgery? At Atlanta General?" He shook his head like he had caught someone in a lie. "Listen, maybe you should just go to the regular terminal. This area is for..." "For what?" Sarah asked quietly. The terminal had gotten very quiet now. Even the people pretending not to watch were listening. "For our regular clients," Cooper finished, looking uncomfortable but still holding on to her documents. "We can't just let anyone walk in here claiming to be a doctor." Sarah felt her patience starting to run out, but she kept her professional calm. She had worked too hard and come too far to let this man make her lose her composure. She reached for her phone. "Sir," she said firmly, "I'd like to speak to your supervisor now. And I need my documents back, please. Those are my personal identification papers, and you have no right to keep them." Cooper's face turned red. "Are you threatening me?" he asked, his voice getting louder. "I could call airport security right now. We'll see who belongs here then." Little did Cooper know, but his loud voice and obvious unfair treatment had caught more attention than he realized. Help was about to arrive from an unexpected direction, and things were about to change very quickly. The situation at the private terminal was getting worse by the minute. More people had stopped to watch what was happening, and many had their phones out, recording everything. Sarah could feel her chance of making it to Boston on time slipping away with each passing moment. "I am not threatening you," Sarah said calmly. "I am simply asking for my documents back and to speak with your supervisor." She kept her hands visible on the counter, knowing from years of experience how important it was to appear non-threatening in situations like this. Cooper's face got even redder. "You're being disruptive," he said loudly. "This is a secure area. I've worked here for 12 years, and I know what our real customers look like." He put extra weight on the word real, making his meaning very clear to everyone listening. Sarah took out her phone and started to dial the conference organizers. "Let me call the people who booked this flight for me," she said. "They can confirm everything." "Put that phone away," Cooper almost shouted. "No phones in the security area. That's it. I'm calling airport police." He reached for his radio while still holding onto Sarah's documents with his other hand. Two older women who had been watching nearby stepped closer. One of them, a white woman in expensive clothes, spoke up. "Excuse me, but I've been watching this whole thing. This is completely unfair. She showed you all her papers." Cooper ignored the woman and spoke into his radio. "Security to the private terminal entrance. We have an uncooperative individual attempting unauthorized access." His voice shook a little as he said it, probably because he could see more people gathering around. Sarah felt a mix of emotions: anger, frustration, and sadness. But mostly, she felt determined. She had faced discrimination before, but this time it was being captured on at least 10 different phones. She decided to try one more time to reason with him. "Mr. Cooper," she said, speaking clearly so everyone could hear, "let's review the facts. I have shown you my medical license, my passport, my flight documents, and my hospital ID. You have not given me a single valid reason for denying me access. You've let several other passengers through with barely a glance at their papers." A young man in the crowd called out, "I got it all on video, doctor. You didn't check anyone else's ID like this." Others nodded in agreement. Cooper's radio crackled. "Copy that. Security team en route." He smiled triumphantly at Sarah. "Now we'll get this sorted out properly." Sarah stood her ground. "Yes, we will. And I want to be very clear about what's happening here." She looked around at all the people watching. "Today, I'm trying to get to Boston to teach other doctors about a new brain surgery technique that could save lives. I've done everything right. I have every document needed. The only reason I'm being stopped is because Mr. Cooper doesn't believe a black woman could be a neurosurgeon with a private flight booking." The crowd grew louder with disapproving murmurs. Cooper's triumphant smile started to fade as he realized how many people were watching and recording. He shuffled the papers in his hands nervously. I'm just following security protocols," he stuttered, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. Just then, Sarah's phone rang. It was the conference organizers wondering why she hadn't checked in for her flight yet. She put the phone on speaker. "Dr. Washington," a voice said clearly, "this is Michael from the International Neurosurgery Conference. We're worried because you haven't checked in for your flight yet. Is everything okay? We need our keynote speaker in Boston by this afternoon." The timing couldn't have been better. Cooper's face went from red to pale as the voice on the speaker continued. "Should we call the charter company directly? They assured us their VIP terminal staff would take excellent care of you." Sarah looked Cooper straight in the eye. "Yes, Michael, please do call them. It seems there's some confusion about my right to be here. And please stay on the line. Airport security is on their way, and I think we're all going to have a very interesting conversation about what happened this morning." The sound of approaching footsteps indicated that security was arriving, but they weren't the only ones coming. From another direction, a woman in a business suit was walking quickly toward the scene, her face showing that she had already heard about the situation unfolding at her terminal. Jessica Martinez, the customer service manager at the private terminal, walked quickly through the crowd that had gathered. She had worked at the terminal for 8 years and knew most of their regular customers. When she saw Dr. Washington standing at the security desk, she immediately recognized her from their email exchanges about the flight arrangements. "What's going on here?" Jessica asked, looking first at Cooper and then at the documents he was still holding in his hands. She had already received 3 urgent messages about a possible discrimination incident at her terminal. Cooper straightened up, trying to look professional. "This woman claims she has a private flight booking, but I'm just following security protocols." "This woman," Jessica interrupted, "is Dr. Sarah Washington, one of our VIP clients." She turned to Sarah with an apologetic look. "Dr. Washington, I am so sorry. We've been expecting you. I personally handled your flight arrangements last week." The crowd watching the scene grew quiet, waiting to see what would happen next. Cooper's face turned a pale shade of white as he realized his mistake. "But I was just checking." Cooper stumbled over his words, still holding Sarah's documents like they were hot coals. Jessica held out her hand. "Give me those documents right now." Her voice was firm and professional, but everyone could hear how angry she was. Cooper handed over the papers with shaking hands. Just then, 2 airport security officers arrived. They looked around at the crowd, the phones recording everything, and the tense scene at the desk. "What seems to be the problem here?" one of the officers asked. Jessica stepped forward. "Officers, I'm Jessica Martinez, customer service manager for this terminal. We've had an unfortunate incident of discrimination against one of our valued clients." She gestured to the security cameras above them. "Everything has been recorded on our security system." Sarah spoke up, her voice steady. "I've been detained here for 20 minutes, denied access to my flight, and had my documents held against my will, all while other passengers were allowed through with minimal checking." The security officers looked at each other, then at Cooper, who was now sweating visibly. One officer took out a notepad and started writing. Jessica turned to her tablet and pulled up Dr. Washington's client profile. Dr. Washington is a renowned neurosurgeon, scheduled for a private flight to Boston, where she's giving the keynote speech at a medical conference. She showed the tablet to the officers. All her paperwork was verified days ago. The officers nodded, looking serious. One of them turned to Cooper. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us to file a report." Cooper started to protest, but the officer held up his hand. "This is not optional, sir. We've received multiple complaints about similar incidents in the past few weeks. This needs to be properly investigated." Jessica turned to the crowd that was still recording. "Ladies and gentlemen, please respect Dr. Washington's privacy, and thank you to those who spoke up and recorded this incident. Your witness accounts will be very helpful." She then focused on Sarah. "Dr. Washington, please let me personally escort you to your flight. The pilot has been notified of the delay, and they're waiting for you. We'll make sure you get to Boston on time for your speech." Sarah nodded, finally feeling the tension leave her shoulders. "Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I appreciate your help." As they walked away from the security desk, they could hear Cooper arguing with the security officers behind them. Several people in the crowd gave Sarah supportive smiles and nods. "Dr. Washington," Jessica said as they walked, "I want you to know that this behavior is completely unacceptable. Our terminal director is already on his way in, and we will be launching a full investigation. Your next flights with us will be complimentary." Sarah looked back at the scene they were leaving behind. Cooper was now sitting in a chair, looking defeated as the officers took statements from witnesses. The phones were still recording. "You know," Sarah said quietly to Jessica, "sometimes these difficult moments lead to important changes. Maybe some good will come from this morning after all." Jessica nodded in agreement as they approached the private terminal gate where Sarah's delayed flight was waiting. Behind them, the sound of more airport officials arriving echoed through the terminal. It was clear that this incident was far from over, but at least now, justice was being served. The terminal director, Mr. James Anderson, arrived within minutes. He was a tall man in his 50s, wearing a dark suit and a concerned expression. The crowd had gotten bigger, and many people were still recording with their phones. "Ms. Martinez, can you explain what happened here?" Mr. Anderson asked, looking at the scene before him. Cooper was still sitting with the security officers, and Dr. Washington stood nearby with her documents finally back in her hands. Jessica nodded and pulled out her tablet. "Sir, I have something you need to see." She opened the security camera app and quickly found the footage from the last hour. "Watch how Mr. Cooper treated different passengers this morning." They'd all gathered around the tablet. The security footage was clear and had sound. It showed Cooper waving through several white passengers with barely a glance at their papers. Then it showed the complete interaction with Dr. Washington, including every disrespectful comment and action. "There's more," Jessica said, swiping to another screen. "I checked our complaint records. In the last 6 months, we've received 8 similar complaints about Mr. Cooper. All of them were from passengers of color, but none were investigated properly." Mr. Anderson's face grew serious as he watched. "Dr. Washington," he said, turning to Sarah, "I want to personally apologize for how you were treated. This is completely unacceptable." One of the security officers stepped forward with his notebook. "Sir, we've taken statements from 12 witnesses. They'd all confirmed that Mr. Cooper was checking IDs selectively based on race. We have their contact information and video evidence." Cooper finally spoke up from his chair, his voice shaking. "I was just doing my job. Being careful with security is part of my duty." "No," Mr. Anderson said firmly. "Discrimination is not part of anyone's duty here. Ms. Martinez, please show Mr. Cooper the difference in how we processed passengers this morning." Jessica played more security footage. The times were clearly shown. White passengers took an average of 20 seconds to check in. When Dr. Washington approached, Cooper spent over 20 minutes questioning her credentials. "The evidence is very clear," Mr. Anderson said. He turned to the security officers. "Please escort Mr. Cooper to the office. We'll need his badge and security cards immediately." Sarah watched as Cooper's face fell. All his arrogance from earlier was gone, replaced by the look of someone who knew they had been caught. The security cameras had captured everything. Every smirk, every dismissive gesture, every moment of discrimination. Jessica spoke up again. We also have emails from conference organizers confirming Dr. Washington's VIP status. They sent these weeks ago, with her photo and credentials. Mr. Cooper had access to all this information at his security station. More terminal staff had arrived, and they were helping to clear the crowd. Many passengers came forward to share their videos with the security team. Some told stories about seeing Cooper do similar things on other days. Dr. Washington, Mr. Anderson said, "We would like to make this right, not just for today, but to prevent this from happening to anyone else. Would you be willing to file an official complaint? It would help us make important changes in our hiring and training." Sarah looked at her watch. Her flight had been delayed, but she could still make it to Boston in time for her speech. She thought about all the times in her life when she had faced discrimination and stayed quiet. Not today. "Yes," she said firmly, "I will file a complaint, and I hope you'll use those security videos for training to show exactly what discrimination looks like and why it's wrong." Mr. Anderson nodded. "We will, and Ms. Martinez will personally handle your travel arrangements from now on." He turned to the security officers. "Please make sure all videos and witness statements are preserved. We'll need them for the investigation." As Cooper was led away by security, Sarah saw something change in the faces of the terminal staff. They looked determined, like people who had learned an important lesson. Sometimes it took a moment like this, caught on camera, impossible to deny, to make real change happen. Jessica touched Sarah's arm gently. "Your plane is ready, Dr. Washington. Let me walk you to the gate." She paused and added, "And thank you for standing your ground. You've helped us uncover a problem that needed to be fixed." The next few hours at the private terminal were very busy. While Dr. Washington finally boarded her flight to Boston, the terminal officials gathered in the main office to deal with the situation. The room was tense as they watched more security videos and read through old complaints about Cooper. "This is worse than we thought," Mr. Anderson said, looking at the stack of papers on his desk. "Cooper has been doing this for months, maybe even years. We just never put all the pieces together before." Jessica Martinez nodded as she showed him her tablet. "Look at these numbers, sir. In the past year, Cooper stopped and questioned 85% of our non-white passengers, but he only checked IDs for 10% of white passengers. The data is very clear." The airport's legal team had arrived too. They sat around the big conference table, looking serious as they watched the videos from that morning. The lawyer in charge, Mrs. Thompson, took off her glasses and sighed. "This is a serious case of discrimination," she said. "We need to take strong action right away, and we need to make big changes in how we handle complaints." Meanwhile, Cooper sat in a small office down the hall. His security badge and uniform had been taken away. Two HR officials were interviewing him about his actions. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he tried to explain himself. "I was just being careful," he kept saying, but the evidence told a different story. "Mr. Cooper," one HR official said, "we have videos showing you let white passengers walk right through while stopping others for long periods. How do you explain that?" Cooper had no good answer. He just stared at his hands and mumbled something about security protocols. Back in the main office, Mr. Anderson made some important decisions. First, Cooper is fired, effective immediately. Second, we're starting a full investigation of all our security staff. Third, we're bringing in experts to train everyone about treating all passengers fairly. Jessica was taking notes on her tablet. "Sir, I've already contacted a respected diversity training company. They can start next week, and I've set up a new system to track and investigate every complaint right away." The phone on the desk rang. It was the airport's main office. The videos of Cooper stopping Dr. Washington had started appearing on social media. News reporters were calling, asking for comments. "We need to make a public statement," Mrs. Thompson said. "We have to show people that we're taking this seriously and making real changes." Mr. Anderson agreed. He started writing a statement that would go out to all news channels. "We apologize to Dr. Washington and all passengers who have faced unfair treatment. We have fired the responsible employee and are making important changes to prevent this from happening again." Just then, Jessica got an email from Dr. Washington's conference organizers. "Sir, look at this," she said. "Dr. Washington is going to talk about what happened here in her speech. She's using it as an example of why we need to fight discrimination everywhere, even in unexpected places. The terminal staff worked late into the evening. They reviewed security procedures, wrote new rules, and planned the changes they would make. Cooper's replacement would be carefully chosen, with a focus on finding someone who would treat all passengers with respect. "We can't change what happened," Mr. Anderson said to his team, "but we can learn from it and make sure it never happens again." As the sun set outside the terminal windows, the staff could see private planes taking off and landing. Each one carried passengers who deserved to be treated with respect, no matter what they looked like. Jessica looked at her tablet one last time before heading home. Dr. Washington had landed safely in Boston. The conference organizer said she would arrive at the medical meeting just in time to give her important speech. Sometimes, Jessica said to Mr. Anderson, it takes one brave person standing up to show us what needs to change. Dr. Washington did that for us today. Mr. Anderson nodded. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they worked to fix their problems. But today, they had taken the first important steps toward making their terminal a fair place for everyone. 1 week after the incident, the private terminal looked very different. New signs hung on the walls saying "Welcome all" in many languages. The security desk where Cooper used to work now had 2 officers instead of 1, and they smiled at every passenger who came through. Jessica Martinez stood at her usual spot, watching the morning passengers arrive. The new security officer, Maria Rodriguez, was doing an excellent job. She checked everyone's documents quickly and professionally, treating each person with the same respect. "Good morning, Ms. Martinez," Maria said as she processed another passenger. "The new system is working really well. Everyone gets through in less than 5 minutes now." Jessica smiled. The changes they had made were already showing good results. The new computer system tracked how long each security check took, making sure no one was treated unfairly. Every passenger got the same quick, professional service. That morning, the terminal staff gathered for their first training session. The room was full as an expert named Dr. James Chen started his presentation about treating everyone fairly. "What happened last week was a wake-up call," Dr. Chen said. "But your quick response shows that you want to make things right. Today, we'll learn how to spot unfair treatment and stop it before it happens." The staff watched videos of good and bad security checks. They learned about hidden bias, the way people sometimes treat others unfairly without realizing it. Even Mr. Anderson sat in the front row, taking notes. "Remember," Dr. Chen told them, "every passenger who comes through those doors deserves respect. It doesn't matter what they look like or where they come from." During the lunch break, Jessica checked her email. There was a message from Dr. Washington in Boston. The subject line made her smile. "Thank you for making changes." She opened the email and read it to Mr. Anderson. "Dear Ms. Martinez, I wanted to let you know that my speech at the medical conference included the story of what happened at your terminal. But I also told them about the quick changes you made afterward. Sometimes, bad situations can lead to good changes if people are willing to learn and improve. Thank you for being willing to learn and improve." Mr. Anderson nodded. "She's right. This whole thing taught us an important lesson. We're a better terminal now because of it." The afternoon brought more good news. The airport's main office had decided to use their new training program at all terminals, not just the private one. Jessica's new complaint system would be copied throughout the airport. Maria called Jessica over to her desk. "Look at this," she said, showing her computer screen. "We'd processed 200 passengers today. Average check time 4 minutes. No complaints. No delays. Just good, fair service for everyone." The security cameras were still recording everything, but now they were used differently. Instead of catching bad behavior, they helped show new staff how to do their jobs well. The videos of Cooper were used in training sessions to show what not to do. Later that day, a young black woman doctor came through the terminal. She looked nervous at first, but Maria's friendly smile put her at ease. The security check took exactly 4 minutes, just like all the others. "Have a good flight, doctor," Maria said, handing back the papers with a smile. Jessica watched the doctor walk to her gate, wheeling her small suitcase. The woman looked back once and smiled, seeming surprised by how easy everything had been. "That's how it should be," Jessica said to herself. "That's how it will be from now on." As the sun set outside the big terminal windows, Jessica looked at the "Welcome All" signs again. They weren't just words on the wall anymore. They were a promise to every passenger who came through their doors. The last training session of the day was ending. Staff members walked out talking about what they had learned. There was a new energy in the terminal, a feeling that they were part of something important, making sure everyone was treated fairly every single day. "We still have more to learn," Mr. Anderson said as he prepared to leave for the day. "But we're on the right path now, and we're never going back to the old way of doing things." 3 months after the incident, the Atlanta private terminal had become a very different place. The story of what happened to Dr. Sarah Washington had made news all over the country. Now, early on a sunny Tuesday morning, Sarah walked through the same terminal doors again. This time, everything was different. The first thing she saw was a big sign that said, "Everyone welcome here," in many languages. The security desk where Cooper used to work now had Maria Rodriguez, the new head of security, sitting there with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Dr. Washington," Maria said warmly. "Your flight to New York is on time. May I see your documents, please?" She processed Sarah's papers quickly and professionally, just like she did for every passenger. Sarah looked around as she waited. The terminal had changed in many ways. There were new faces among the staff, people from different backgrounds working together. Security cameras still watched everything, but now they were used to make sure everyone was treated fairly. Jessica Martinez walked up to greet Sarah. "It's good to see you again, Dr. Washington. You know, your story has helped airports all over the country make changes." Sarah nodded. "I've heard about that. How are things going here?" Jessica smiled proudly. "In the past 3 months, we trained over 200 airport workers. Not just in our terminal, but in the main airport too. Every security check is timed and recorded. Every complaint is checked right away. And look at this." She showed Sarah her tablet. The screen showed numbers and charts. Average security check time, 4 minutes. Customer complaints, 0 in the past month. Staff satisfaction, highest ever. The changes were working. But the best part, Jessica said, is what's happening beyond our airport. 10 other airports have copied our new training program. Even some big stores and hotels are using our story to teach their security staff how to treat people fairly. Sarah watched as other passengers went through security. Everyone got the same quick, respectful treatment. No one was stopped for extra questions. No one was made to feel unwelcome. "What happened to Cooper?" Sarah asked quietly. Jessica shook her head. "He tried to get security jobs at other places, but our story had spread. Now he works at a warehouse. But you know what? Some good came from his actions. His bad behavior helped everyone see what needed to change." A young black woman in a doctor's coat walked through the terminal doors. Sarah watched as Maria greeted her with the same friendly smile and quick service she gave everyone else. The doctor looked surprised at how easy everything was. "That's Dr. Jones," Jessica explained. "She's a new heart surgeon at Atlanta General. She told us that she chose to fly from our terminal because she heard about the changes we made after your experience." Sarah felt proud hearing this. Her difficult experience had led to real improvements. Not just in this terminal, but in many places across the country. "Your flight is ready, Dr. Washington," Maria called from the desk. "Have a good trip to New York." As Sarah walked to her gate, she remembered that morning 3 months ago. The fear, the anger, the unfairness of it all. But now those feelings had turned into something positive. Real change had happened because she stood up for herself, because people recorded the truth, and because good people decided to fix what was wrong. On the plane, Sarah opened her laptop to work on her speech for New York. She was speaking to a group of medical students about more than just brain surgery. She would tell them about standing up for what's right, about making changes that last, and about how one morning at an airport helped make the world a little bit better. The plane took off into the bright morning sky. Below her, the airport looked small, but its impact had become very big. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the worst moments can lead to the best changes, if people are brave enough to stand up and strong enough to make things right.